what I heard in what you just said is that you implemented an inbound marketing strategy, applied it to a social media network, but professional social media network, which then generated inbound traffic, which then turned into qualified leads, which then turned into qualified opportunities, which then were converted into contract opportunities with these brands.
That is correct, sir.
Okay.
That is correct. But in my defense, I hadn't actually studied sales yet.
Question: how do you go from liberal arts major to having brands like IBM, The Economist, and Verizon reaching out to you in your inbox to pitch you on why you should be working with them? That's just one of the questions that we're going to be covering on today's episode of The Modern Consultant. That's because I had the pleasure of talking with Earle Richards, strategy, operations, and analytics consultant for Fortune 500s that you have heard about and startups that you will be hearing about in the future. But that's not all. We also get into how to execute one of these consulting projects phenomenally well. So well that 70% of new business is actually going to come through referrals. We talk about pre-mortem, we talk about post-mortem, we talk about onboarding, we talk about execution and everything in between. We also talk about the career growth stages of the independent consultant journey. And we also talk about when not to productize. There's a lot for us to cover in today's episode. Thank you for tuning in, and let's get right to it. First off, Earle, I just want to say welcome to the show. It is an honor to have you here, and I really mean that because we've known each other at this point for over a decade, and that has been a decade of me having the privilege of learning from you, you being there for me as a friend, and so much more. So I just want to say thank you for making the time to do this.
And I just want to say, Mark, I am honored and humbled to be your guest on this podcast. I want to say that, not to be competitive, but it's more than mutual for me. So there you go. I win.
I appreciate that. Good times. So before we hit the record button, you said that there was a story behind you going to Wesleyan. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
That is
correct.
The first Wesleyan. There's a couple in America.
Okay. All right. So I'm personally curious though about, because we've never really spoken about like how you made the transition from like college to then getting into the world of consulting, because like I had shared before we started recording, one of the things that I've been personally interested in is a lot of people struggle to get new consulting opportunities, new contracts and everything. And you reliably work with, some of the biggest brands and stuff in the world, from IBM to The Economist and many, many more, so tell us the story of who was Earle before consulting and how you got into it.
Absolutely. Putting skeletons out of the closet. I was a very, very curious, nerdy child. I'm from a small island in the Caribbean called St. John, part of the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I mentioned that because how I ended up to school was sheer curiosity. I was that little kid that I literally would read the encyclopedia when I saw something on PBS, whether Sesame Street or Wishbone, to age myself a little bit, right? And so for me, my transition into going to school, a liberal arts school called Wesleyan University in Connecticut, then up in New York, I would say it's just sheer curiosity. And a little bit of ego involved because I like having the answers. I like knowing stuff. And so for me, call it the will to learn. I don't mind putting myself in situations where I can learn lessons and take it from there and sharing those lessons. So for me, that's been kind of my guiding principle.
That's really interesting to me. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but I grew up with a printed collection of Encyclopedia Britannica. Did I ever tell you?
No, you didn't, because I was World Book. I had a world
Yeah.
book. It was missing
Yeah.
Q for some reason, but I was like, I learned nothing about Q, but I read different letters. What was your favorite book letter?
I had like the 26 volume,
Yeah.
you got to dig into the index to find which of the books you then need to go to find the answer
Yep.
to the word that you were looking. Yeah.
Been
Yeah.
there. Been
100%. Yeah, I did. So that actually explains a lot. Because
The hard one was
both.
origami. The hardest one for me was origami. I remember this being 8 years old, learned from him in Sesame Street, and I was like, "What is origami?" And
Hmm.
they talked about it in the show, but then of course I had to learn more. So then I went to mine was World Book Encyclopedia, not
Hmm.
Britannica.
Okay, so this is cool. It explains so much because we both, through our own independent journeys, got deep into the world of personal development as well as professional development and the world of consulting.
Yes.
And so that's very fascinating to me. I'm discovering this live. So how then do you go from Wesleyan to becoming the consultant that is then working with like these globally recognized brands?
Sure. So many stories I could share, but the one I would tell you is the one I told my college, not recruiter, but he's the college counselor at my high school, and I had been to a few campuses my junior year of high school, and the one that I'm going to was in university. He sat me down in his office and he asked me, "What was the one thing that stood out for you for the one college that he knows I was excited about?" And I was like going through my head, saw some really great classes, met some really interesting students. I was a pre-fosh, we used to call it, before I attended. And I was going through all the things like the food was amazing. The campus food was amazing. And then I had to settle on the people. And it was obnoxious, but so prescient. The one thing that he wrote on a word on the paper and then they showed it up, he's like, the people. So one of the things that made my college experience as valuable as it was for me, and still to this day, I'm 20 years later, still friends with the friends from college. It was the people that I met there, the people I learned from.
Mm.
And to answer your question, long-windedly, admittedly, I wouldn't have gotten where I am today. I would have accomplished some of the things I have if it wasn't for the people in my life. My literal first job is one of my really good friends from college, and he happened to share this role. I still share this role for a strategy analyst. I'm like, my friend Severio. It's like, Silver, there's nothing strategic or analytical about me. Why would you think this job is for me? But
Mhm.
he knew me so well. And we've been in some classes together, et cetera. And he knew me so well. I was like, why don't you give it another look? I think you might be a good fit for this role. And that started my journey in this hybrid role of somebody involved with strategy, operations, and analytics. But it was because of people in my life that saw things that I may have missed that helped me get to me where I'm at. I would not be here if it wasn't for the people in my life and the books, including encyclopedias.
So bigger themes I'm even hearing within that is not just, having a group of people around you who could potentially introduce you to new opportunities, who can
Right.
see into yourself, personally, professionally, to then, make a connection as far as what might be a strong fit. But the other thing that I'm also hearing within that is you being the kind of individual that's open to new opportunities as well, because sometimes, at least in my own life, I've had situations where a great opportunity has come along. I haven't been open to it though, and it passes me by, and it goes to someone else, and I see them take
Yep.
off with it. But then
Yep.
there are other opportunities where I have said yes to, and so you being able to have the eyes to say yes to the right thing is something that I think anyone, uh,
Yes.
myself, I could learn from that. Anyone listening to this could also learn from it as well. But to bridge that to the next question,
Mhm.
if you do it once, okay, it might be luck. If you do it twice, okay, great. Might
Yeah.
still be luck, but do it three times, and that's pattern recognition. There's something going on there. And you haven't
Yeah.
done it just three times. You've done it more than 10 times. And again, like working
Yeah.
with, some of the best in the world. And so how did you then go from one to three or even like one to 10 of your first consulting opportunities?
Honestly, it's funny you took the words right out of my mouth when you said pattern recognition. If I were to say that I've had any mutant power or any superpower, it would be the able to figure things out really quickly and figure out the timing. You know, my dad was a musician. I was a musician when I was a kid, and I just started to figure out patterns. And to answer your question, I would say that I started despite the brands that I worked with, the size of the company, the industries. I started to see more of the commonalities between the brands I was working on and even in the agencies I worked at and the teams I worked on. I started to see different patterns. Like there's an expression in Korean, and I'm sure it's in other Asian countries, but same, but different. So my brain was starting to noticing the patterns. And so to your point, by the third opportunity, the third group of team I worked with, the third brand, I started to see, oh, well, it's a little different. It's a different industry. You're not finance, you're CPG, but you're in a healthcare, but you're still trying to find the right audience, make sure that you're giving them what they want, make sure you can figure out how to deliver what they want, and then make sure that you can measure how well things are going, right? Okay. And regardless of the company, regardless of the clients, from my experience at least, every client is trying to do one of those things. And so once you start to see the patterns of things, you can start to learn more, but still apply what I've picked up along the way.
So to go even deeper on this, something that I know that you are exceptionally good at and something that has inspired me to become better at it is you are a ferocious note taker, like, and particularly a ferocious, like, digital note taker. You categorize everything to an incredible amount of detail. And I'm curious, has that always been the case? For example, at the end of the first consulting project, were you journaling? Were you taking notes or not? Or was it just, mental notes even?
Mental notes, I would say, the more than anything. I'm a big fan of written notes, and I do make it a habit to write down even during, this conversation. Even if I'm not writing it down, I'm making notes in my head as we have this conversation. For me, the way I look at it is that when I'm having conversations with clients or friends or just even somebody at the bar, my mind, it's like, yeah. You ever seen Batman? Have you heard of the guy named Batman? Rich guy, likes to jump in the roofs
maybe just a little bit.
Crime and stuff like that. That guy. Well, he had a bat belt, right? Bright yellow bat belt that has all the cool things like a batarang and all that stuff. Well, the way I look at my mind is when I have conversations with really interesting people or experiences with different clients and brands, I'm adding to my bat belt. Check Charlie Munger. He's the right-hand man to, who's the rich guy? Warren Buffett.
Yes, I believe so.
Right-hand man to Warren Buffett. Yeah, I think he calls it mental models or the lattice work of mental models. And so I call it my bat belt. It's more relatable to me. But the idea is that every time I have an interaction, I am taking the lessons I've learned from my own experiences, but from others, and putting them in my bat belt. So then when I see it again, i.e. back to pattern recognition, I can bring it up again.
Okay, that makes sense. Something that someone watching or listening this is just not going to have context on is if they're in a conversation with you, it is normal mid-conversation for you to send hyperlinks to things that are happening in that conversation. Like, that's the level of note-taking that I'm talking about. Like that's a real thing.
That is true. I was just on a call the other day. I do that. I didn't think that was an uncommon thing, but I guess so.
Yeah. That's why we're having this conversation, because again, there's these subtle things that you do that you think you see it as normal, but they're actually like consulting superpowers, because there's no meeting notes to even send at the end of the call. They're already there. And it was sent digitally, usually through some medium that can be searched. And so there's a search index of every thing that has ever been spoken about with every person, you know? And so like there's I notice things like that. And so I'm curious. Consulting project, like when would you say you began to identify as a consultant? At least for me, when I started consulting is not when I even would have said that I was a consultant. Was it the same
Right.
for you?
It was the same in terms of I wouldn't call it imposter syndrome, but I was really, really reluctant to call myself a consultant. In
Hmm.
fact, when I started, I call it freelancing, right? So in my career path, I always often tell, clients I work with or potential hiring managers or that I speak to for opportunities, I divide my career in chapters. My first chapter in my career was starting in analytics, strategy and analytics and digital marketing, digital agencies. And I work with some really well-known brands, learned a lot. I got really comfortable with a lot of platforms and I've leveled up. And I think the next chapter of my career was taking everything that I've learned, but how can I, for lack of a better expression, how can I go dating? Right. So for me, my at the time I by the time I was making that transition, different chapter of my career, it was around the Great Recession, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to get my MBA. This is an interesting story. I don't really get to say it out loud, but I was trying to figure out what to do about getting my MBA because I knew I wanted to level up my skills, level up my knowledge, and I want to see what I can learn because I like learning, so I can give more to my clients. And I was like, well, but I'm also broke. So, and there's a recession. So what can I do? And I discovered this site because Google was amazing by Josh Kaufman. He did this, he called it the
Yes.
personal MBA. And he
Mhm.
had this philosophy in terms of using some of the best books in business in different areas. So you can teach yourself the basic skills so you can get better in whatever um, section discipline you want to get better into. For example, it could be marketing, it could be sales or operations or finance. And so my mind was thinking that so instead of paying money to learn something in a class, the next chapter of my career was what I titled my personal MBA. So I started freelancing, taking on 3 months, 6 months, year long projects, but focusing on areas that I wanted to get better at. So there was one string of opportunities that I engaged with, but I was learning more about sales, like what it is to find a prospect. How do you go through the lead funnel? How do you figure out what's the best way to follow up? What's the best framing when you're telling a story to get your prospects to, turn your prospects into clients, and then hopefully to evangelists. And there's another time when I was learning more about marketing. What is the difference between digital marketing and branding and
Yeah.
growth hacking? Which was just about at the time. So for me, I reverse engineered it and said that instead of me paying a school, something that like I was only considering some of the top 10, right? We're talking Harvard Business School, we're talking Columbia. I started just taking on projects so that way I can learn the skills while getting paid. It's a win-win.
So again, I didn't know this, but I had I took a similar path in
Mhm.
that I had this vision for, what would it take for me to become a chief marketing officer? And
And it's
then how could I construct uh, internships
yeah.
in the different departments that I would need to master? What courses would I need to take? What's the skill stack that
Yeah.
I need to learn in order to be able to round that out?
Yeah.
So that it's so interesting that like you came to the same conclusion
Yeah.
yourself. Um,
Yeah.
Dive in a little bit deeper on this though.
Please.
You were reading all of these books. Uh,
Yeah.
how long, for example, did it take you to read the personal MBA? I'm just curious.
The book hadn't come out yet. That was just a
Oh, the
blog.
book hadn't come out yet. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. I
But like
think
on average though, like how long does it take you to go through?
uh so this is before Audible, Amazon bought Audible. So for me, probably a book a week. I could get the book done in a week, probably sooner depending on what ended up happening. It became an inflection point because once you start going on, so for example, I call them courses in my mind because I was trying to mimic the MBA program. Once you read one book on sales, then you read another book that has a different perspective on sales. So you start to see the different similarities and differences between different approaches. So
Yeah.
I started getting faster at reading the more I read about the same topic. So I started out like one book a week, for example, right?
Mhm.
Then I could get through two a week, and if I wanted to aggressively, I could do three a week. But it was only because once you start to have the basics and you recognize some of the similar concepts, some of the similar ideas, then you could start to, oh, I've seen this. I know what they're talking about when it comes to psychology. Like I know these concepts. So
I'm glad. Thank you for answering that because, again, there are people listening to this who maybe might read 4 books for the year, and you're saying that maybe you read like sometimes 3 books in a week. So I just wanted to benchmark that throughput, the
yeah.
learning
Oh,
throughput for being able to just architect an exponential growth curve
right,
through just the types of clients that you were working with over time. And so of
right,
course learning here is a key theme.
right.
And what do you, if you could go back in time
Sure.
to tell Earl of the first 3 consulting projects,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know what Earl knows now, like what
Yeah.
would you tell yourself? How would you advise yourself? Is there anything different you would do in your consulting journey?
That's a great question. I would say that, like you mentioned, I had a very similar journey in terms of when I was curious of something, I had one go-to source that I'll go to for it. Like our sets of encyclopedias, for example. Then when the internet came to my house, game changer, right? I can look up anything I want. It was great. But one of the things that I would say that has helped me later on in my career because I was better at asking for help was leveraging people who were ahead of me, but where I wanted to go to. So I've been lucky, especially earlier in my career, the first chapter of my career, of working under or next to some really great, just not even just professionals, but managers and bosses. And I think that the thing that I would do differently is, take advantage of their experience, their knowledge, their skills, right?
Okay.
Whether it's virtually taking them out to coffee, for example, or just getting to know them better. Because like I said, um, one of the things that's got me to where I'm at from, knee high on the islands to going to school in New England and doing what I've done here in New York City, for me, it's been a combination of just my curiosity and drive to, figure stuff out. But like I said, the people in my life. And what I would do differently is leverage the um they would hate that I call them this, but I consider them as mentors
Mhm.
that I've had to model. I've had the fortune to not only just have a relationship with them, but I was able to model what I admired about them and see what made them successful.
So mentorship, this has come up on previous interviews that I've done as well, and it's not something that's uncommon to, professional, health, wealth, and love, as Tony Robbins likes to say. Uh, so jumping forward in time
Mhm.
to answer a question that I know someone who's a little bit earlier on in their consulting journey might have, which is, how do you reliably get your foot in the door with some of these bigger brands like The Economist and IBM? Do they seek you out? Do you seek them out? Is it a referral? How does that even work? How does that happen?
Yeah, like I said, I've been really lucky. There were ups and downs in my career so far, absolutely. But I think for me, it's been a combination of things. It's mostly been through, I hate to say it because I was like such a marketer, but my branding on LinkedIn, for example, right?
Okay.
I didn't realize at the time, but like I said, during my first chapter of my career, I had done, I've been rewarded for the work that I did, and that reflected in the opportunities that I had in the first chapter of my career. Because
Mhm.
of that, the way that I, found a lot of these opportunities is that they actually found me, and by them I mean the recruiters or the
I see.
hiring managers.
Okay.
And actually, one of my first freelance consulting gigs was learning about SEO. I don't know nothing about search, but I need to know the basics so I can know what I'm talking about. And I realized that I could use the best practices and principles of SEO to my LinkedIn profile. So I
Ooh,
made it
okay.
easier using those best practices. This is the basic level. I'm not intermediate or advanced at all, but
Mhm.
using the basic principles and practices of SEO, I made sure to tell the story that would get the attention of the hiring managers, the recruiters, the headhunters from these
Yeah.
staffing agencies, recruiting agencies, and these brands, whatnot, to come find me. And they will always show up in my inbox, my LinkedIn my inbox, and they would always say like, "Your experience is amazing." And this is like me, like 5 years at a, 5 years in my career. And I was like, I didn't think it was, but I guess so.
So you're very humble. And what I heard in what you just said is that you implemented an inbound marketing strategy,
Yeah.
applied it to a social media network, but professional social media network, which then
Yeah.
generated inbound traffic, which then turned into qualified leads, which then turned into qualified opportunities, which then were converted into contract opportunities with these brands.
That is
It,
correct, sir.
okay.
That is correct. But in my defense, I hadn't actually studied sales yet. So
Okay.
I just finished marketing. I was good on analytics and sales. I hadn't gotten there yet. But now that I know all those words mean now, but then I would
Mhm.
have no idea what you're talking about.
So I mean, but in some ways, it could be inspiring to the right person that you can do these things without necessarily having this extensive, like formal or technical training in it. So long as it's effective, then it works.
Yeah.
You just have to do the right things in the right place
Right.
to be able to be found.
Right.
So that's actually a very, like, in my opinion, that's a universal principle that can be
I
applied
think so.
until the end of time.
And I want to just make sure that not to interject, but I want to make sure that, like, for anybody who's listening, myself, my younger self included, I would say that understand that, you know, you're going to try things and some things may not quote unquote work, but then you learn from those and you take those lessons to maybe try something differently, or and then so that we can see the results. So like in my upcoming TED talk, which is yet to be scheduled, my metaphor will be that my career has been like a Roomba in a dirty living room. I'm just bumping into stuff and sucking it up along the way. And so for me, like a lot of these, like in hindsight, it looks like it made sense. So yeah, you're doing a lead gen campaign for your own career. And I'm like, I didn't know it at the time, but that it just what made sense to me. So I think just want to make it clear to people who are listening that I tried something and I took the feedback from it. And if it worked, I kept doing it. And if it didn't, I changed it. It's not rocket science. Not
So
that
you
smart.
applied the scientific method for the purposes of
You really are good at branding. Yes, you really are good at
professional
branding.
development. I just come from a background in science, and so part of what we do is we listen
Yes,
and then put things in the appropriate category and
that is fair. That is
for
fair. I didn't.
technical accuracy.
I
That's,
didn't want to. I didn't want to mislabel myself. I'm
that's,
not a scientific person at all. I'll tell you this when
that's
it's over. Strategy and analytics. What are you talking about? Science? What? But
yeah,
yeah.
so that's part of what we do. So to hone in then on
Yeah.
the next step of like the consulting journey. We've been talking about the consulting journey in
Yeah.
terms of career growth stages. But
Yes.
now I want to zoom in on the consultant's journey through just one project. And let's
Okay.
say and we don't have to talk about specific projects, but
Yeah.
so far we've been talking about the first part, which is just even being found, and
Yeah.
then starting a new project and then onboarding. You have a lot of experience
Yeah.
with crafting onboarding experiences and also being onboarded to different
Yeah.
teams. Uh,
Yeah.
what is one thing you wish that consultants would know that nobody talks about when it comes to getting started with a new team?
I think that's what I found in hindsight, and you know, I thought about this a lot actually, and it's a great question. I think that we've talked about, curiosity being one of my main drivers to for anything. What I've found really helpful in my career, especially that part of my career with the consulting, is asking better questions, right? And yes, I like reading books. Yes, I like learning from mentors. But when it comes to consulting specifically, I the thing that I found the most valuable is being able to ask the right questions so I can get to the root of the problem, right?
Mm.
Oftentimes, regardless of whatever engagement I'm referring to, oftentimes some of the clients have this initial idea what the problem is. And I'm open to hearing about it. I want to learn more because from their business to their industry, they're the subject matter experts. But I often found that because of my curiosity and because I like asking questions, I want to dig into that a little deeper so I can understand how it works because I want to see the connections. And for me, after asking the right questions, for me is I think okay, this is the why we're here or why we're even talking right now. Then I go into the solving mode. Is like how can we get to where you want to go? So for me, asking questions could be because I started as an analyst. That's literally my job is to ask questions, but it's also to be able to work with clients and their agencies to figure out how do we get those answers, so get them where they want to go. Because even in your experience, you mentioned that you were deciding what do I need to learn, what classes do I need to take, what internships do I need to apply for and crush it at if I wanted to be a CMO, right?
Mhm.
That's something my mind works as well.
What's the most frustrating thing to you about getting started with a new team?
The most frustrating thing I've seen is that most companies, not all, but most companies haven't been the best at providing a knowledge base for anybody that's new. It's not just consultants. It's not just freelancers. It's even full-time employees that are coming, you're joining the team. Because I've done it so many times as a full-time employee, as a consultant, as a freelancer, whatever you want to call me, I know that process in and out. I have a checklist for myself. Like what meetings do I need to join? What resources are being available? What team members I need to meet? What stakeholders I need to be in touch with? I have a checklist in my mind and I have a checklist written because I take notes that I can literally go through just to make sure I get a lay of the land. And a lot of companies, I guess for different reasons, they haven't been the best from my experience at cultivating that institutional knowledge to make it easy for somebody to come on board, regardless of their role.
So you start with a new team.
Sure.
What has made the difference, in your opinion, between teams you've worked with that have done really well
Yeah.
and teams that just crash and burn?
It's really easy to say. So for context for everybody else listening, I have no coordination. I don't play any sports. I can barely dance. And I say that because the metaphor I'm going to draw is on sports ball, and I want to make that context clear. So what I've seen, to draw the analogy in sports, is that the places that don't have strong leadership, i.e. coaching, of where the team wants to go and how we're going to win the game. And also, it's not just the coaching, but the understanding of who the team members are on the team and what are their strengths and weaknesses. So those are the two things that understanding the roles and responsibilities and understanding what's the objective, what's the goal, what are we working towards? I think there's a lot of frameworks out there that people can use, like the OKRs, for example. I'm not.
What does OKRs stand for, just in case?
Oh, yeah. Objectives and key results is a framework, I think, that was developed at Intel, but I believe that Google adopted it and made it more of their process for their global organization. But the idea is that for every level of team member, from the individual contributor to the team itself, to the division, to the organization, there is a clear objective of what they're trying to accomplish for a time period. Could be a quarter, could be a year, could be 5 years. But the idea is that what's your key objective? What are we trying to get to? The analogy I always tell to some clients is before you start training for the marathon, you got to know where the finish line is, right? So it's good to know where the finish line is. So that's your objective. And so the other part of that, the O is the objectives, the KR is the key results. And basically that's saying, how do you know that you've gone there? Right. So you want to know, like, what gives you evidence that you've increased your sales, you've improved your branding, you're creating an application that everybody can't live without. See TikTok. The idea is that you have something that's measurable that can give you proof to the team, to the individual contributor, to the whole organization that you've accomplished your goals. And I found that that's necessary for every project I engage with. When they don't have that, there's no goal. There's nowhere they're going different places.
So let's say they have it. What could cause them to still fail?
Not planning to fail.
Really? Oh, tell me
not
more.
planning
Yeah.
to fail. So
All right.
one of the things I've seen, and you can call it toxic positivity, right? There's one thing about saying that you want to shoot for your goal. You want to accomplish your objectives. You want to, hit the mark. One of the things that I found actually most helpful, just me being a skeptic, is thinking about the reversed. Before the start of the project, thinking about how can we fail at this? Like, what would happen? Like, we miss our deadlines. We don't have enough funding. We don't have a member on our team that's available that got sick or something like that. And so for me, I think the concept is another concept. Can't give you the attribution, but it's called the pre-mortem. So whenever the project, especially in consulting, you have a post-mortem. So when things are done and you've either accomplished your goals or you didn't accomplish your goals, you take a look back at what worked, what didn't work, what you can do better for next time. So that way, you at least, if you didn't even hit your numbers, you at least get lessons so you can apply for the next initiative. That's a post-mortem. What I'm referring to, it's called the pre-mortem, thinking about assuming we didn't hit our numbers for whatever reason. We start to think about those reasons so we can plan accordingly.
Again, this scientists do this. Scientists, when planning,
I think there's something to this science thing. I should look into that. There's something to the science thing.
Maybe, man. Like, before planning an experiment, you would create a hypothesis, and what would happen if, basically, these conditions are met, and you, to write a testable hypothesis, you have to make a statement that can be falsifiable. And, sometimes that might mean quantifying it, but either way, you're making a prediction about what the outcome may be. And then you construct the study to then validate or invalidate that hypothesis. So that makes perfect sense to me.
Now that I think about it, I didn't realize at the time, but now that you keep reminding me of the analogies between the scientific method and my approach to consulting, that's essentially what I'm doing, which surprising to me because I was not a scientist in high school, but the approach made sense to me.
And I really want to underline this, is that science is for everybody. You don't have to go get a PhD to benefit from science.
Yes.
Like, everyone who's been through like high school or so at some point has probably done some kind of like science experiment, and it might not be at a super large scale, but the scientific method is still in there, and we can use that. And we continue to use it sometimes without even knowing it, and so just continuing though on this, consultant's journey through a project. So we're executing on the project, and on average, what would you say is like the length of projects that you work on? Is it like less than 3 months, a year, multi-year contracts? What and do you even have a preference for length of contract?
I don't have a preference, but the ones that I've had the most experience with so far has been 6 months to a year, somewhere in between that window. Because oftentimes for some of these projects, getting up to speed, even regardless of how urgent the need is, and me coming in to help with whatever challenge that the client is dealing with, it takes some time to get ramped up and then to set things up so you can start to measure the results. So it's hard to do it in 3 months unless things are set up already, and I'm familiar with it. But I said the sweet spot for me has been the 6 to 12 month window, because not only can I set things up, get to know, get oriented, and then hopefully, we can start to see the results of our efforts. It's not just me, obviously, but working with teams, whether it's development team or sales teams or marketing teams, so that we can start to see the results.
So 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
And would you say these are mission based projects where there's like a specific objective of the over that time period, or is it evolving, over the same time period?
I would say there's usually a specific issue that's brought in. Like, given my background and the work I've done, like, it's a specific, like, if somebody's reaching out to me, there's a specific need that either the hiring manager or the recruiter is trying to solve for. And if you're bringing me in, it's like, all right, I need a guy who knows this, and I'm that guy. Whether it's through either the hiring managers, the recruiters that I work with, or the referrals that I get. It's like, this platform, or this, you have been dealt with this issue before, and I have, can you help us solve this problem? Because it's like, you bring me in, something's on fire, and I shine in that situation. Actually, for me, there's a clear thing to be solved. I struggle with something that's evolving, nebulous, organic. Can you realize I studied copywriting for a little bit there? But like I said, it's, for me, again, back to the scientific method, it's good for me to have a hypothesis that I need to test. And so I can put things in place so we can get the results that they're hoping for. It's not a guarantee that it'll work, but just at least we'll have some kind of approach that's going to at least make sense. You can communicate to your stakeholders.
Mm. Scientists are typically judged based on the strength of their method and not so much the outcomes. And there are scientists who have been paid a lifetime to cure cancer. It's not cured yet, but that doesn't mean that they're a bad scientist. It might just mean that cancer is a difficult thing to solve.
Then that would make them just bad consultants. And that would be the difference. See, that's a subtle difference between a scientist and a consultant.
Nice. Because, I love the distinction.
I support that, like, the strength of their framework.
Results.
But your clients are, whether it's your employer, if you're doing full time, if you're a client, if you're working as a consultant or a freelancer, you always clarify that there's not always a guarantee. But your goal as a consultant is to put your client in the best place possible to accomplish their goals. And one of the things is, anybody can tell you that, who's ever done any freelancing, consulting, or contracting, is that businesses are willing to put their money where their mouth is, if you can deliver the results that they're looking for. So one, yes, you want to have that scientific rigor and set things up so that way we can not only accomplish the goals, but prove that your involvement helped accomplish that goal. But if you can say that even directionally, your expertise has contributed to going in the right direction, that's where you want to be as a consultant. Scientists, they have a moonshot. Totally get it. If you want to solve cancer, solve cancer. See, if you want to cure cancer, obviously that's going to take time. But if you're making progress, well, I get that. But when it comes to the world of business, regardless of what business you're in, results have to factor in as well.
Great distinction. Thank you for that. Continuing, actually, brief recap so far. Sure. So to be first, we want to be able to be found, and hey, that could be done through a social media platform such as LinkedIn. Could also apply to even job platforms, where people might be wherever your ideal economic buyer, might be searching for who has the skills and capabilities to be able to fill the need that they have. And then from there, being able to interview with them, onboard into the project, have a vision for where it is that they're going and being able to help them, then having the skills to be able to execute on the project. Now, as you begin to offboard from a project, and it's time for you to, maybe add other clients to the roster. Uh, what's the split, would you say, between referrals to clients versus uh, just new clients finding you through this inbound method that you have set up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that it's been 70-30, and the split
Okay.
is 30% being referrals. Because, like I said, with some clients that I've worked with, may not have gotten the results that they wanted, but I set things up so they can be successful.
Yeah.
But they're looking for specific results, and sometimes that didn't happen, despite my best efforts. So I would say 30% of referrals from clients I've worked with, and I would say 70% it's new, partly because one of the things, like I mentioned before, I like to learn. So being able to um, keep my options open in terms of new clients in different industries, different size companies, has been more my approach, at least in the most recent chapter of my career.
Yeah.
That was intentional. One of the things, one of the insights that I had from my first chapter when I was going to the strategy and analytics path was that I didn't want to get too niche into analytics. Like this is Earle. Back to your lesson about your recap about the branding. This is Earle. He's the analytics guy. He's the numbers guy. I'm like, no, not. This is not me. I mean, I can do that, but it's not like me. So for me, to answer your question, it would be a 70-30 split of referrals from a specific project or a team that I worked with before, and 70 because I wanted to work with different clients, different industries, different companies.
Mm. Okay, that is super clear. Thank you for that, because I am looking at this through the lens of whether or not someone is coming into this and they're new in their,
Yeah.
independent consulting journey, or they are further along in their journey and they're looking to hear how other consultants have done it so that they can think about their own consulting journey through each project for how they might improve,
Yeah.
throughput as well as quality, and also to just rethink, their business model for, because, something that I've shared with my own past clients is the most talented neurosurgeon can't operate on their own brain, and so it is helpful, in my opinion, and experience, to be able to hear from someone such as yourself how they're doing it.
Yeah. Um, the best, given that context, that makes total sense for somebody who's just getting started or somebody further along their consulting journey. I'll be honest, it's not unlike dating.
Hmm.
You're like, we've all been in relationships, some more than most. And what I've always likened my experiences with working with clients, it's like finding the good match. You mentioned this before earlier in our call, in our conversation, that making sure that I'm a good fit for the problem or the challenge that the client's working with, and having those conversations and asking those questions so we can make sure that I have what they're looking for. Because I've had the conversations where I'm not that guy. For example, I
Oh,
don't do
okay.
content. I do not write words. I do not draw pictures. I am not that guy. But if you have things to pull together, these systems to talk together, teams you need to communicate between each other, I have that skill set. I can do that. But back to the point of like where you are in your consulting journey, every experience that you have, every client engagement that you have, take it as another tool that you can add to your back belt, regardless of where
Mm.
you are. And you should take restock of that. And you mentioned earlier about the pre-mortem when you're working with clients, but I want to also emphasize the post-mortem. Take a look, what worked in that last engagement, what worked with that client. And then if it worked, keep doing that. And if it doesn't, try something different. Again, now that you pointed it out, it's a scientific method.
Mhm. So this is good because you've given us a very clear picture again of consulting growth stages, also the consultant journey throughout a project.
Yeah.
There's something else that you have been seeding into this conversation, as well, which is uh, the consultant business model, and more specifically within the business model, positioning. You
Yeah.
were very intentional about not being the analytics guy, but instead being the guy, like you just mentioned, that if you need strategy, make sure that the operations like all, fits together, making sure the team all talks together.
Yeah.
That's a very a strategic consulting position, or strategic advisory, if you will,
Yeah.
is what it sounds like. Did you always know that you did not want to be the analytics guy, even though it's one of your capabilities?
I didn't know at the time, but like I said, during my first chapter in my career, I was, like I said, I could think ahead. I think it was Stephen Covey and the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. I think it was number two, that's begin with the end in mind. So I
Mm.
was talking to my bosses, trying to think like where I'm going to be in 5 years of my career. And I was looking at my bosses and I admired them and I know they're brilliant and I learned a lot from them. But do I want to be the analytics director of a place or thing? I was thinking about that. I wasn't sure if that's where I wanted to go. And so for me, I kept an open mind to that. And through my, again, personal MBA chapter of my career, I started to narrow down the areas that not only were I learned that I could contribute the most in, but I found more exciting. So for me, to your point earlier about strategy, like you need to have a plan. Even if it doesn't work, you need to have a plan. You need to have a goal so you can know where we're shooting towards. And don't get me wrong, it evolves. You can change it, but you still need a plan. And then operations. I was a Lego kid. I was a nerd reading encyclopedia. I was like to build a lot of Legos. You can judge me all you want, but I like to see how things fit together. I like the operations. Like you have a plan. How do you make that plan a reality? And then for
Mm.
me, back to your point earlier, my last, I would say, interlocking circle would be analytics. How do we measure and show that it worked? That we've made that even if we didn't get to the goal, what progress did we make? And so for me, I just, like I mentioned before, I was a room boy in a dirty room. I just ended up figuring out that, oh yeah, I do like strategy. I do like operations. I do like analytics. And
Yeah.
I started to narrow down opportunities that have a good overlap of those three different skill sets.
That's fascinating to me because the theme that I'm hearing within that now is not just science, but also engineering. Engineers are obsessed with making sure that it can perform the function
Yeah.
as intended. It's
Yeah.
not just about like creating a pretty plan.
Yeah.
It's like at the end of the day, does it do the thing? Does it get the job done?
Yeah.
Um, I have many friends in engineering,
Yeah.
and have had to take classes on engineering. I recognize it when I see it. Um,
Yeah. I think we have a mutual friend. I'm thinking Charles at the top of my mind.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense. But
So
yeah.
there's something else that we haven't spoken about, which is personal development. We've both, I mean, obviously there's like, if you're listening to this, you can't see the bookshelves behind me, but if you're watching this, then you can see like these books behind me. And that's just one set of bookshelves that are able to be seen like on camera. Um, and you've probably read like more than these entire bookshelves. How has personal development shaped your approach to consulting? And actually, even better,
Huh?
is there any book, 1 through 3 books, that have shaped your approach to consulting more than the others?
Oof. Like I said, I've read a lot of books.
Hmm.
That's a good one. Okay. Organizing the library in my head. So there was one. Was okay. So the first one on top of my mind would be Tim Ferriss' 4 Hour Work Week. It's probably well known at this point. Spent years in the top 10 position in New York Times bestseller. And from that book, I learned a lot, some of the basic concepts like the Parkinson's law and the Pareto principles, and the idea of thinking about planning ahead in terms of your life, in terms of how do you want to spend your life. That actually got me started on the consulting path because I wasn't sure that I was, to be very frank, sold on the 9 to 5 idea. That's how I wanted to live my life. And so I think one of the big reasons why I started consulting was trying to figure out how, I think they constantly call it the 4 Ws: the who, the what, and the when, and the why. I believe so. And basically, the where, I believe it's who, what, where, and why, I believe. But the long story short is having control over the clients you worked with, the projects you worked on, the teams you worked with. And so for me, that's why I think that kind of started my freelance consulting contracting journey, because I wanted to get more say in the clients I worked with and the projects I worked on. So Tim Ferriss is definitely number one. And I'm having trouble remembering the name that talked about, the name escapes me right now. It talked about the difference between entrepreneur, a manager, and a practitioner. And it's about building a franchise model. And it'll come to me later, but it's one of my books that it'll come to me later because I have so many books in my head right now. But basically, the biggest concept of the book is that oftentimes when people start the journey as a technician. I think the word he uses is technician. Like you're a specialty, you're a designer, you're a copywriter.
Is it the E Myth by Michael?
Yes, Michael
yes.
Gerber.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the E Myth. And I think the E Myth Revisited, I think he made some updates to it. But that concept alone, just the idea of when you are starting as a consultant, you have to wear different hats in that role. And oftentimes you start as a technician, as in you have a specialty that you are being hired for. Whether, like I said, you could be a designer, you could be a developer, an engineer, for example. You can be an analyst, and there's a specialty that you are good at. That's doing the day-to-day job. Then you have to be a manager. Like you have to learn how to manage your calendar, manage the calendar of your clients, and be able to manage the project so you can deliver, the goals to the expectations of your client. And then there's I believe he calls it the entrepreneurial role, but I could be mistaken. But generally, the idea is like you're thinking holistically, like who is Earle.co as a brand? As how do you want to position yourself? So how I can get new clients to work with? How can I invest in educational resources that I can level up my skills and become more not only just attractive to potential new clients to work with, but also more knowledgeable. Like for me, for example, I have 3 different platforms I'm learning right now just so I can develop my skills, whether it's learning all the new updates to GA4, all the updates to GTM, and understanding the need for BigQuery. And because
for someone listening in who's not familiar with the acronyms, what do those?
So I forgot to geek out sometimes. So GA is for stands for Google Analytics. It's a well-known platform that's used for measurement. It's built on the freemium model, so everybody can install Google Analytics for their online presence. And it can be as simple as a site. Do you have your name, your address, and how to contact you, to as robust as an e-commerce platform. Like I've worked with clients who use GA, the advanced version of GA, to manage their online store, right, and everything in between. So GA4 is the next evolution of Google Analytics, and there've been a significant change in how they approach things. It's not an upgrade; it's kind of a new product in a lot of ways. So, and there's a deadline coming up in the summer where you have to be able to all companies that are using this as their measurement tool of choice, digital measurement tool of choice for their applications or for their websites or their e-commerce stores. There needs to be an understanding of what changes are happening and how they need to be adapted to the new approach. So that's one platform, Google Analytics 4, GA4. Google Tag Manager, and it's the same family, and that's making it easier for clients to be able to add tracking to their site to make it easier for them to understand what's working and what's not working. For example, you want to make sure that if you're working with Facebook with digital ads, you're working with Google for their search ads, you're investing money in your emails to send out to your audience. You want to make sure you understand what's working, what's not working. In order to do that, you need to have the tracking and tagging in place. And Google Tag Manager, also known as GTM, is a tool that makes it much easier for people to do that. You don't have to learn code, and it makes it easier for you to understand what's working and what's not working. So that's just a couple of things that I'm brushing up on, only because it makes not only me more knowledgeable, I'm able to help my clients better, but it makes me more attractive as well, because now that I know I'm confident more in my GA4 skills, I can potentially propose and pitch clients saying that I can help them with that transition because it's going to be a big change.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Okay. You've been extremely generous with your time, and so I only have a couple more questions to wrap up.
Well, you
Like
know
you've
me, I
been
like to talk.
you've been really generous. Like I for the right person, this is gonna make a huge difference for them.
Great.
Uh, Looking to the future,
Yeah.
some people, when it comes to like consulting, like they productize their expertise in the form of online courses, for instance.
Yeah.
You haven't done this. Instead, you have focused on, and some other people scale their consulting by like growing consulting teams.
Yeah.
So far, you've chosen to be a solo consultant that doesn't productize. Any reasons why?
I enjoy the conversations I have with the clients because I've thought about this. And obviously, in the space, that's, as you mentioned, those are some of the traditional paths that certain consultants take. I like working with clients to help solve their problems. And for example, the product approach would, and it works for some people, doesn't work for me because it's too hands off, right? And don't get me wrong, I like working with a lot of great products out there that I can like learn keyboard shortcuts and stuff like that. But I enjoy having those conversations and getting to the root cause of whatever challenge that the client is dealing with and helping them working with them and their teams to solve it. And the other approach in terms of the classes, et cetera, I'm sure that I can come up with a methodology and framework that I borrow liberally, i.e., steal from a lot of the resources I've read. But like I said, one, I've learned in my career is it's not usually one size fits all. I mentioned earlier that yes, there are definitely patterns, regardless of the size of the company and what they're trying to do. I acknowledge that if you're just applying the scientific method to different challenges. But I would say that I like to provide more of a bespoke solution and saying that's not a one size fits all. So that's why I would say that every time, like if you've been at one of my pitch calls, I would tell clients that, yes, I've worked with all the analytics platforms and I have one that I'm the most familiar with, but I need to learn more about what you're trying to accomplish before I come with a recommendation. Because maybe Google Analytics is not the right fit for you. Maybe it's Adobe Analytics because that's a better fit. Maybe Google Tag Manager is not what you want. Maybe it's Telium IQ, right? Depending on how robust you need your tag management solution to be, right? And so I think on both paths, I've been kind of doing my own path in the middle. And for me right now, that's a good place for me to be. At some point, I'm going to have to figure out a way, how do I make what I do scalable? And maybe just, and I think the thing that comes to me right now is I've had the fortune of also not working with really good clients, but working with really good subject matter experts who add something to the table. So for example, I worked with a good friend of mine and he was great at development and engineering, especially on what I say the back end in terms of building an application and making sure that things are being captured. The databases, relational database, working with the back end data, if it's especially if it's really robust, setting up the SQL server, et cetera. I'm more on the front end, making sure that all the platforms are integrated, like we have the right data visualization solution, and making sure that what teams are seeing, whether it's sales and marketing or product teams, are using are helpful, drawing on the data that's connected. So I think for me, it's not going to be so much the teaching route or the productizing route. It's going to be more the partnership route. Working with people who have skills and an expertise that are complementary to mine.
Well said. And I just want to say thank you for the comprehensive answers to like all of this. Yeah. Again, this is going to be one that people are going to be able to come back to for years to come. Honestly, it's an honor to know you, as a colleague, as a friend. And again, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this.
No, thank you. I'm honored to, help as much as I can. I think what you're doing is amazing because I think that there are not a lot of resources for people who are considering the consulting track. And I think that just having voices to the concepts, people who've actually done it and done it in their own way, different specialties. It's an opportunity that I wish I had when I started. So
Yep.
your younger generation, your younger whippersnappers, you should be grateful.
Well, I think people who are well into their consulting journey could also learn from you as well. So thank you for all of this.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for checking out the show. If you liked it, go ahead and hit the like button and also subscribe so you don't miss another one. It also tells us which ones that you like the most so that we can then do more interviews like that. If you want to go from idea to implementation, though, especially if you're wanting to productize your expertise so that you can scale your impact on your clients and, of course, grow your business, then join our email list. There, we're going to talk about how modern consultants can productize their expertise so that they can have a greater impact on the world around them and live life on their terms. If that's up your alley, I hope to see you on the other side. Talk soon.